Guys, today I'll talk about one of the biggest crises the world is faced with. Nearly half a century uh, after the World War II, it appears to be the world's superpowers are at loggerheads, and Russia is inching towards a full-scale war with its mass escalation and its 100,000 plus forces on ground, in the sea, and in the air preparedness. And it seems like this war is too imminent, or either as trumpeted by Biden administration that it's almost there. At any moment, Russia could invade Ukraine, and it has all the preparedness essential, and it is in a combat position, and the kind of massive deployment of all warfares, including its prolonged on-site and clandestine, aerial, even launching of the missile the day before. And it seems like it's not just a routine kind of exercise, military drill, but a real preparedness, and to make sure that any moment it wishes to to advance towards the territory, because they're already almost cordoned off, or almost the entire Ukraine is slipping in the clutch of Russia, and most of the diplomatic moves have so far not resulted in any positive consequences, and diplomacy seems to be failing, despite French President Macron's move, and a number of negotiations on the table, and even a telephonic conversation with Biden and Putin. And latest, I would like to share what the things are on the ground and where things stand. President Biden has agreed in principle for almost a very crucial, vital meeting with Russian president. As long as its condition is, as long as Russia doesn't further invade Ukraine, according to the White Statement. And potential Biden summit is actually proposed by the French president. Ukraine has been blamed for a full-scale attacks, and Russia's pretext to look for some kind of excuses in the form of multiple violations of the truces. Is almost recorded 100 truce violations in the east after a day of heavy weapons fired that saw fears of the Russian invasion mount. And to tell you the apprehensions or the impending danger of this full-scale war, Boris Johnson's, the UK Prime Minister, actually is reported to have said that this is the biggest war in Europe since 1945. So what's the vital reason of this kind of almost full-scale drawn recalcitrance and belligerence, and Russia's flexing its muscles and showing the world that it is capable of not only bringing the whole of the West to its knees, also it can put conditions of how its hegemonistic role as a superpower in the Cold War era, which appears to be over. Although NATO is that's allies formation, and Biden has been seeking support from all the NATO members, and in fact, it has already garnered tacit support from all of its allies, including Germany, one of the biggest allies. Actually, Germany has not been so potent or is vocal in its support, because somehow it has entered an agreement with a pipeline that Russia this is a vital pipeline energy supply to Germany, because Germany lately has almost shut down most of their nuclear installation plants, and they are largely reliant and not without its being really having its own suppliers and the mainstay, because the gas pipeline is so important for Germany, and it appears to be at a loss. Because if Russia, there is in the event of the war, if Russia really invades Ukraine, and that appears to be highly likely in the events that have unfolded recently, because this is the only way Russia can prove the world with its biggest ally, China, that it still can muster strength, and it's can be pitted against the Western world, which appears to be expanding its net through adding new members like Ukraine to the NATO allies. And the NATO principle stands in the basic premise that if any of the country is attacked, it would be deemed as an attack on all the other member states. So Russia, under no circumstance, wants Ukraine to join NATO, because it would be a death blow to its sovereignty, and it always sees or perceives Ukraine as its vital, integral part and parcel of the national integrity, or because it has cultural, social, and linguistic affinity. In fact, Ukraine is divided into two parts, like Western and Eastern, and Western parts appears to be protégé of the West, because they are more lenient towards and likely to join NATO, and they are the Western backed natives, those fluent in other than the Ukrainian language, and the eastern part appears to have more loyal or have greater affiliations, or appear to be more fascinated or obsessed with the Russians, because Russians always find the Ukrainians and Crimeans are their neighbors, because they have been the integral part erstwhile before the integration. I mean disintegration of the socialist bloc. So obviously Putin doesn't want his next door neighbor or his ex-ally or his its sister or own bodies to join hands with those outsiders, and then bring about an upheaval in the Russian social, cultural, and economic hegemony. So the summit is planned, and things appear to be averted for a while, although Russia is not backing out because of its amassment of the huge artillery, and a time might come when Russians may be spurred or may be poised. In fact, it is poised to take any chance in case of the backing out of the Westerners, because Westerners, like Biden has proposed unheard of or unprecedented sanctions. Although Russia has always been imposed with sanctions and once for one pretext or the other, although it hasn't made any real dent into their economic prowess, and it has been doing fine, and it remains one of the most powerful nations that can lock horns easily with the Westerners, and they will always, the Westerners always perceive Russians or communist bloc states as one of their arch enemies or rivals. So if NATO considers an attack against one or several members an attack against all, and this principle is a collective defense, and that's what is bothering Russia all the time, because Russia will also have would like to have at least a block of its own where they could be in a defensive mode. And Russia has been vociferously opposing NATO membership of Ukraine because Russia will be further weakened if Ukraine joins hands with NATO, and then there will be Western cultural invasion, like, that's why Russian didn't give Crimean any chance, and it so wistfully and so brazenly invaded Crimea, and it had most of the bases in Crimea these days. Actually, they have so. The foreign minister level meetings, the president's level meetings, they all haven't brought about any tangible outcome so far, and it appears as if Russia has an upper hand, not only in negotiation but also in striking a good deal as far as sanctions are concerned, or Ukrainian. So Ukrainian people are in flux. They feel jittery because they have to face this kind of inherent danger of being attacked anytime, and the legal security guarantees from the US and NATO, they're not going to save Ukraine forever. So I don't get this point that, why is the world body so intent on bringing about, Russia to its knees and ready to engage in a full-scale war, bringing so many other nations involved, and that would be like, if the war escalates, that would be like a third world war, because NATO allies, if they join hands and they start, defending Ukraine, ultimately Ukraine will be destroyed, and all its infrastructure, all its economy, and most of the gains that it has made after the breakaway as an independent nations. So what's the point of having and waging a full-scale war with a neighbor, which has been a part of Russia? So it's neither in the interest of the Russians or in the interest of the Westerners to further escalate or go for kind of military solutions. It has got to be diplomatic solutions, and these two countries, they can stay as peaceful neighbors because they have their lineage and their Slavics parentage, and so they can ultimately choose. It could be a kind of referendum where the western part of Ukrainians, those who are allies of the Westerners and or lenient toward Westerners and Easterners, can be given. Probably through the plebiscite or through referendum, it could be decided whether the Soviet Union will have the eastern part and the NATO can have the western part of it. Although that's a remote possibility of dividing the nation into two and then having a peaceful solution toward this issue of, that's not a, the Ukraine, why Ukraine remains such a prized possession of Russia, because Ukraine has been a nuclear hub. In fact, 7 nuclear tipped cruise missiles and 2,000 tactical nuclear weapons, they all have been, in 1994, all of these were the prized possession of this nation, and Russia used to bank upon for its security concerns. And in fact, Russians have been touting that they will protect the sovereignty of the nation, and this nation has had a history of corruptions and open pro-Moscow policy, and part of them are rebels, and the rebels are with the Russians, and there have been trade deals with. So this integration of Russia, I mean Ukraine, into the NATO is not going to be cakewalk. It's not going to be easy. It's going to, because Russia will always view it as a serious affront towards its own hegemony and its own sovereignty. Because after all, this imperialist regime, has been ruling the roost over all these satellite nations and countries. So Russia also must wait for the right kind of public opinion, whether really it wants to join hands with the European nations and being a member of the NATO, and the people who are almost fleeing in fear towards the other regions, especially the Russian-speaking eastern part of the Ukrainians population, and those who will remain, who feel as if they are disenfranchised, in the sense that they will be, they are already deemed to be a part of the Russian peninsula, and if you go into the history of, there is a long history of how these satellite countries broke away from the nationalist Russia, and how all those communist blocs the Warsaw Pact, and they they had the brotherly ties, and they were the same people, and today they're seen as a separate entity with its own governance, and even the president, the maybe Western pro or so. Crimea is already a part of Russia now, which was supposed to be a satellite nation. Now it's the turn of Ukraine. So Crimea liberation, the rest of the world just kept quiet, and they just let it happen. And that was a time when these European nations and NATO should have intervened, and that's a set of precedence for the Russian to further flex its muscles and push back the rebellions, or try to have a proxy regime. Sometimes not a direct regime; it could be a proxy regime. So Putin is a hard-headed person. And it knows, the Putin knows that its military might cannot be challenged easily, because 100,000 plus soldiers with nuclear arsenals and missiles and all kinds of navy preparedness, there's no match for the Westerners, and it's not in interest of the, because geographically it's not payable, and it's going to be a real disaster for Westerners if they really get involved in a full-scale war. I'm thinking of all the collateral damages, because it's the sea, it's the land, it's the air, and obviously if the Western blocs are with NATO forces, they intervene, there will be deployment of the latest, high-tech weaponaries, and that would not be restricted to. So military alliances, these countries are founding members of NATO. If they join hand at the Cold War, now things have changed. The scenario is no more, we're dead past from the colonial era, and we're dead past from the where we have the Cold War between these two superpowers. Now Russia is no longer that power that needed to be pushed back, and the world government and even the Westerners should have actually intervene when it flexes muscles and very easily annexed Crimea. So that was a mistake, and in fact Russia believes that Ukrainian independence was not at all called for, and it has to be part and parcel of the Russian Federation, because Ukrainian is an ethnic Russian, and they, I mean, western part of them all speak the Russians, and they all historically and colonial history says that they would find at ease and they would be much better, settle with Russians than being a part and employee of, or could be part of the NATO memberships. So Russifying Ukraine, I mean, like if Russia is trying to make its own brainchild or its own, I mean, its inheritance. So it's, it's up to Russia whether it can endanger its own safety, security, and it's ready to be slapped with unprecedented sanctions, which further break the economic bone of this backbone of Russian economy. So it's not in the interest of in this during this 2 years of pandemic where economy is already sluggish and we are already struggling. The whole world is struggling with the economic downturn. So, in fact, 70% of the people reject the very thought of having any kind of intrusion of the Westerners or in fact, 72% consider Russia as a hostile state, and Russians are not being deemed with trust because Putin is a very unpredictable, unpredictable with his high-handed overtures, and his stance has not been cooperative, and he has been calling shots. In fact, he has been trying to forge another alliance with China as one of the biggest adversaries of the USA and the rest of the world, I mean the Westerners. And China, Russia would like to jump into the fray with its economic gains of energy security, because China has one of the biggest reserve of the gas and fuel. And Russians do have also, assured amount of one of the biggest gas and reserves to last, and it can, if it stops the, and perhaps it passes through all these states. So it's neither in the interests of the Westerners, I mean the blocs, NATO blocs with the USA interventions, and nor in the interest of Russia to go for a full-scale invasion, slapping the diplomacy and backing out of its old commitments towards the world peace order, which has been replaced by the Cold War that we had, and all the whole of the world suffered during the Cold War era, where the Axis and all the non-Axis powers were at loggerheads. And this only, we have somehow been able to avert two world wars, which broke the very basic tenets of mutual sustenance and the safety of the mankind, the UN resolutions, all that. Now we hardly afford to have another war, and that to a full scale between or among these superpowers. Whether it's for the interest of Ukrainians to be a part of the NATO member, or so the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, he has been a Western ally, and he has been eyeing on, and it's always, it finds Putin as one of the greatest adversary, and they always suspect that it's only a matter of time when Russia will invade, and sometimes seems like it's almost there, unless the diplomacy really triumphs. So let's hope that ultimately sense prevails upon these world bodies and world leaders, and this kind of tussle or conflict that has been raging for so long, and the whole world is watching with bated breath of the outcome of these two giant neighbors, whether they could offer amicable and peaceful solution to this crisis. Thank you so much. I hope that I've shed some light on this, on the crux of the situation, and the latest, the good move, or something to rejoice. That is that though both of us, Biden and Putin have agreed to go for diplomatic, fresh round of talks, and we're hoping to have a good, desirable outcome of this meeting without further escalation of the conflict.